This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we bring you information, insights, ideas, and interviews from some of the industry's top thought leaders. Head to mediasalesmastery.com to help pick the topic and guide the show.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. I'm your host, Jamie Wood, and our topic today is 7 deadly sins of agency sales. For many salespeople, the start of our career will often be in direct sales. This is where we learn the foundational skills of our profession. It's important to note, however, that this skill set is not instantly transferable if you wish to make the transition into agency sales. Selling direct versus into an agency market are both very unique sales disciplines, which require a vastly different approach. Now, if on the other hand, you're someone who has always worked in agency sales, it's important to also acknowledge that there is a natural tension that occurs in the agency and media supplier relationship, meaning the incentives and drivers of media salespeople and their respective media organizations can often be at odds with those of the agencies and the broader market they're selling into. Failing to identify and acknowledge these important nuances and adapting your style accordingly can be cause for unnecessary friction, which can quickly damage your reputation and relationship. Today, I'm joined by Adam Hickey, Agency Director of Ikon Brisbane. We're going to cover off 7 of the most commonly raised issues that advertising agency executives feel they encounter with media salespeople. Good to have you here, mate. It's interesting discussing this topic because we were chatting about it a few weeks ago, and I think it's important to note that our intention here isn't just to call out bad behaviour. We're not suggesting agencies are infallible, but it does feel like there are sources of friction that inevitably kind of arise in that agency and media transaction. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I mean, any relationship dynamic where you're relying on the other party, I think you're going to get into a space, particularly if your goals aren't aligned, again, like any relationship, friction will arise. There's people involved. And I tend to think it usually comes from everyone just caring a lot about what they're trying to achieve.
The first 5.
You've obviously spent a fair amount of time leading agencies, working in the agency space, interacting with media salespeople. But to set up the context for today, like, what is the philosophy that underpins a media agency? You know, what's ultimately the driver of success for an advertising agency and the staff within it?
Agencies are actually quite simple. There's complexities that sit behind it, but the 2 things it comes back to is people, similar to most businesses, and then product. Agencies aren't that far removed from what sales teams are trying to do. They're developing product that they believe other businesses would benefit from utilising, and then putting people in the middle of it who believe in it wholeheartedly to go out and work with those businesses. If I think about philosophies that underpin agencies I've worked in, the one most common would be growth, right? If your business isn't growing, you're probably going to be in a little bit of trouble, but you can't grow at the detriment of those other parties that you rely on. And that's where relationships come back to it. We're in a business that relies on the people that we work on and the strength of those relationships. And relationships are actually an incredibly complex structure to have to get your head around. They require work, right? Relationships are like meditation. You practice them, you don't perfect them. And I think when we come to work, if we keep that in mind, that we're dealing with people and every day is an opportunity to grow that relationship, yeah, things can always be a bit easier.
Yeah, and I mean, having spent, obviously, my career on the other side of the fence, what you're saying there doesn't necessarily feel like it's too far aligned from what drives a media organisation. You know, it's about growth, it's about shared success with our partners and clients. But I do think that when you work in a commercial environment where you're so accountable for revenue generation and you have a target that effectively will be the metric of success or failure, for want of a better term. That, I think, is where we can often see a lot of this natural tension where salespeople maybe think that their job is to generate revenue, whereas I think the reframe has to be, no, revenue is actually a byproduct or an outcome of delivering great solutions and growing your partner's business.
Yeah, massively. And the parallel, it's a very simple one to draw, is that agencies also work with clients. And friction arises in that relationship if the objective isn't aligned. And I can talk to some of that as we come through some of the more concrete stuff. But I think, the strength of the relationship, being able to play well with others. And all sides of the fence, we're investing so much in staff development, not on hard skills as much as I think we used to, because those can be picked up and shared and grown quite quickly. And frankly, there's an incredibly smart cohort of people coming through our industry at the moment out of university and otherwise who pick up those hard skills very quickly. But the softer skills, the skills that come with time and with experience that can't be accelerated, again, which sort of puts me back to a spot where the more time we spend thinking about each other and the relationships that we have to build, not for the purpose of just getting along, but because we can get to better outcomes sooner.
I'm really heartened to hear that. I mean, the initial motivation to create this podcast was, and I say it every episode, but it's important to reinforce, there really is two strands of professional development if you want to be a career media salesperson. One is the technical skills of the role. A lot of that is learnt on the job. Learning your product, learning how to forecast, learning how to do business plans, having an understanding of how to engage your market. The other side of it is where this podcast, I think, is really trying to fill the void, which is where are those sources of information, intel, expertise from people who have probably learnt by failing. It's oftentimes the campaigns that fail due to a breakdown in communication or a relationship strain that's been put on two different parties. So those are the great areas where I think a lot of media salespeople kind of grow and develop.
Agency would be the same. And you can say this till you're blue in the face, but you don't know it until you know it. But you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. You learn more about your craft, you learn more about the people around you, and you learn more about yourself. Self-awareness being one of the most critical parts of being able to operate in a relationship, which we'll talk about more as we go.
Well, I think the self-awareness is a good segue into the main topic, because what we're really talking about here, I think, is just having an understanding and awareness of how certain activities or behaviours or ways of operating are actually being perceived by the agencies that you're selling into, irrespective of whether your intent is pure or not. I think, a lot of people have a blind spot, myself included. I came from a background of selling direct media and then having to kind of pivot and move into agency. It was a good 12 months of actually going, wow, I can't just pick up this template for success in direct and apply it to agency. There is a very, very different approach required here. So let's jump into it now.
Media Sales Mastery.
Number 1, the deadly sin of agency sales, the sin of talking about your budgets or commissions. Let's reflect on that. Why do we think that would be a source of frustration from an agency standpoint?
The old budget bully. The old what's important to me is important to you. I mean, in fact, we're only one step removed, but the idea of self-orientation, right? People, again, in a relationship, when you're dealing with people, they know when your decision-making criteria is focused on you.
Yeah.
And they will pick that up very, very quickly. And if you begin or end a conversation with what's most important to you, that has nothing to do with the transaction that's taking place, it's not going to go well. It's going to be clear what your motivations are, because it's actually not why you're in the room. Right? We haven't gathered here today to discuss
how to get to your number.
Yeah. We could have a separate meeting about that if you'd like to, but that's not why we're here.
Yeah.
To have this conversation about this phenomenal opportunity or proposal that your business has pulled together for the purpose of growing a client's business. So it can be at cross purposes to why we're in the room in the first place, and that goes back to the friction we're talking about. All of a sudden, we find ourselves in a conversation that we didn't expect to have.
You're also talking about someone's livelihood here too. Nobody wants to have an element of guilt associated with, hey, I really need to hit my number this month. But I just look at it as what you're saying. It's one, it makes it very clear what your motivations are, which are not client-oriented. The other part that I find really interesting, and I'm curious, is whether there is just an element of certain media salespeople going a bit rogue and trying to guilt an agency into spending. Like, this is a compelling reason to spend with us because you spent with us last year, and we've got a big hole to fill this year, and without you, fundamentally, our business is going to be in a pretty bad shape.
It's hard because all of that information is valid, right? All of it, and as I said, it is related. So we work hard to build those relationships. So that is context for that, but not for that meeting. The bit that I come back to is that we work together to drive outcomes for clients' business. Right? We're trying to grow what it is that they do, and that first and foremost needs to be the decision. From an agency perspective, we front up every single day to talk to our clients about what we think the best way to grow their business will be. And if that rationale ladders out to because Mick from That's actually a brand, so I don't want to use that.
We'll beep that out.
Yeah. If that ladders back to because sales rep A is trying to meet his budget, a client is not going to feel confident in the rationale for that campaign. So the decision making is rarely subjective when it comes to an agency side of things, and that added context or pepper of I need to make my budget is rarely, if ever, going to sway any decision making.
And I think there's actually a real failing that can happen the other way around too. Hey, we hit our budget. How good's this? I've just taken home a nice little chunk of change. I mean, that to me just sows the seed of discontent straight away. When your partners, are an agency that are often working, with arguably the same, if not greater effort than you potentially are. They're completely client oriented, and you're there talking about this great bonus you get to take home at the end of the month because of that booking. I just can't see that. Even if somebody likes the person that's selling into the agency, I just can't see that landing well.
Nah, it comes back, and I'm glad we talk about a few more points because I'm looking forward to talking about how agencies themselves are fallible in a lot of spaces as well, and we know that. But the sin for me is the sin of high self-orientation, the sin of putting yourself at the center of decision making when, again, none of this is about the individuals in the room. It's about what we're trying to achieve collectively.
That's a good point to hang on. Let's jump on to the next one. Sin number 2, the sin of not learning or respecting the agency structure. I mean, I'll add some more context to this because nobody worded it specifically like that when I put the survey out. What kept coming out was, engaging the wrong stakeholders. So as a media salesperson, putting a call into somebody in the agency that's either not the decision maker, not the right person to be speaking about that opportunity to, maybe over the head of somebody that actually, feels like you're now stepping on their toes or going above them. And even down to little things, inviting certain people to meetings and excluding others, going around someone because you don't like the result. Those kind of things, which I think we do need to call out and go, you've really got to have a high level of self-awareness to go, how is this, not what your intent is, because oftentimes your intent might be pure to get an answer or to just go to someone you're familiar with, but how might that be perceived by the agency?
Yeah, and I'd start with, if ever you're not sure of why a structure exists, feel like question it. Ask the people who are part of that structure, can you explain why the structure exists? But there's a big difference between not understanding something and not liking it. And when it comes to channels of communication, they traditionally exist for a reason. Most of those to do with efficiency and effectiveness, right? Escalation points, hierarchy, the seniority of conversation that needs to occur at any level, because there is so much to do in any given day that to get those things done, it's standard organizational culture stuff, organizational structure stuff. But if you don't understand why a certain structure is in place, obviously always ask why, because then it can potentially help you feel better about it as well. But I'd say that, again, the number one thing it comes back to is talk to the people who exist within that structure and ask them what's the best way to go forward, because at the end of the day, you're going to need their help in getting those things to go forward. And trying to go around it, if it just feels like a really long walk, you're just going to take a real long walk around something that's not going to change as a result of it. And again, no structural process is built to make things harder. All structure and process is built to make things more effective or more efficient. So if you can understand why that's in place, it'll usually help as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. To me, the big one here is, going over someone's head because you don't like the result. And I think that sort of feeds into a few of the other topics we're going to cover off a bit later on as well. Let's jump on to this one. And the context here is we were late for today's recording session because we went and got coffee first. Thou shall not have bad meeting etiquette. So what are we talking about? Punctuality to me normally is a central tenet of how I run my day and my team. But being late for meetings, showing up ill-prepared, forgetting stuff that was discussed in the last meeting. What was you saying about phones?
Vibrate is not silent. That's in terms of meeting etiquette, we can still hear it vibrating on the boardroom table.
Yeah, and I think, again, this one came back to me in many different forms, but I think the main context here is to go, if you are the media salesperson requesting a meeting with an agency partner, respect their time. There are things that are easy to get right, and there are things that can be very detrimental. Although seemingly small, they can be very detrimental if you don't get them right. some of the things that I know historically I used to really, really, I suppose, not be aware of, but in hindsight, that was really bad meeting etiquette. Just things like not taking notes, forgetting information that was relayed to you in the last meeting, being sort of the person who requests a meeting, but not actually having a meaningful agenda or valid reason to be there, not summarising the meeting well. All of these kind of things, to me, it's a case of everybody's got time constraints in their week. So straight away there's that. But is there something deeper there too?
Yeah, I think time's an easy one to throw in the mix as the why. Why do we need to have effective meetings? Why is it important to have etiquette? Generally, as outside of just having respect for someone else's time, as a salesperson, you more than likely want to get the most out of that meeting yourself. You don't want to turn up back at the office and go, oh fuck, I forgot. I forgot what that meeting was about, and I didn't nothing to report back. Being on time, again, is just an effective use of people's time. It's an easy one to get there. Taking notes, even if you have an eidetic memory, it shows that you're listening. Yeah. Just be involved, be engaged, be in the room. And if you're hungover, taking notes is a great way to stay awake. So I'll give you that one for free. I will say that being good at setting a meeting, setting an agenda, and ensuring a meeting is effective is the quickest way to get an invitation back in a room anywhere in business, whether it's sales, agency, client side. If you help people have an effective meeting, regardless of the purpose, they will remember that, and it will add to your own brand. The biggest thing I do is make sure I know what the objective and purpose of that meeting is. And I walk into a lot of meetings and start it with, okay, what are we going to know at the end of this meeting that we don't know right now? What decision are we going to have made after this 45 minutes? And be very clear what it is. By objective, I don't mean stand around and go, the objective is to share this information. The objective is to decide which part of this information is the most important to proceed on decision making on. So being very clear like that, people will leave a meeting feeling effective. Yeah. And that's why we all come to work. Absolutely. We want to progress things. So I'd almost turn that bad meeting etiquette on its head and say it's not so much about meeting the hygiene, but look at meetings as an opportunity to push things forward.
I would agree. I mean, I think one of the big things, particularly in agency sales too, somebody coming from the direct market will go out with a clear intention to sell a product. And I think the nuances of the agency market are it's not necessarily about that. But then conversely, being somebody who comes from the agency side, they might think that it's, the old general meeting or the relationship meeting, which is just, in my view, null and void. You forge a relationship, you build reputation by having an agenda to why you're meeting. So I think that's a really good insight to raise is if you're going out to, let's say we're going out for the purpose of getting a better understanding of a client's objectives, the framework to me would still be to make sure you've got something of value to bring to that meeting beyond a bunch of questions. Even if it's just setting the agenda with the output of this meeting is going to be that I'm going to have a better solution to put forward to you or an opportunity that I can craft based on a deeper, more intimate knowledge of the client.
And I would also say that there's nothing wrong with that. If it is forging a relationship, there's nothing wrong with going, the objective of this meeting is that I understand what gives you the shits at the end of this meeting. Right? Again, both parties will walk away with a greater ability to proceed more effectively and efficiently. So that's just a mindset shift away from how you're spending your time and the way that you think about meetings.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think particularly in the context of a media, and we'll talk about more about, the drivers of a media organisation. Okay, the market's tight, revenue might be looking a bit soft. Hey, reps, divide and conquer. Let's go out there and up our activity and our face time in market. That's a very one-dimensional sales tactic, and it's got to be underpinned by something of more substance. Because when people are stretched and when time constraints exist, and when you've got a market that is soft, everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's trying to up their contact time in agencies. So even more important to really look at it and go, is my time better spent doing 3 quality meetings with an agenda, with some sort of outcome off the back of it, rather than a spray and pray of going out and seeing 10 people for a general check-in?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing, and we all know how that statement ends. But one way I like to think about during times of change or times of difficulty when you're setting yourself a challenge of having things you've never had before, right? Whether it's a greater share in a tighter market or a higher yield in a harder context. You're thinking about how can I strategically and operationally have something I've never had before. Ipso facto, I can't just do what I've always done. So if I want to have what I've never had, I need to do what I've never done. Probably means you need to be something you've never been before, right? And that could, whether that's a change in the way of the product that you bring or the conversations that you're having. If you have traditionally spoken in a straight line, look at the curly lines. Like it's again, meetings are an opportunity within which to have those conversations about having what you've never had.
It's a really good segue into the next one too, I think, because what we're talking about here is client orientation. So the next sin is the sin of no client orientation in your product. And probably to go deeper on that, it's taking something off the... I mean, I don't think I've ever worked in a media company where there's a shelf.
Yeah,
where you just go rip stuff off it.
I love the term off the shelf.
But I do love the term off the shelf because it's a really good way of showing that you're just proposing something you haven't bothered to tailor or to think about the client you're proposing it to.
I visualise people literally peeling books off a massive bookshelf and just putting them under their arm and heading off to meetings.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that was off the shelf. That was literally off the shelf.
Off the shelf,
and it will go back to the shelf when you return.
So let's think about it, not just the off-the-shelf thing, but even just sort of bundling and packaging your inventory in a way where an agency can't unbundle it without having to rebrief. Or just pushing a product that's not right. I mean, we go back to that point around drivers. I don't care if your company has an incentive to sell this product. If it's not right for the client, don't take it out to me. Or don't take it out to me without putting the appropriate amount of time and thought and energy into being pragmatic about how it could work. Yeah,
if it's ancillary or I can't align it to what it is we're trying to achieve, whether it's me or the client, someone's going to shave this stuff off because it's not. If it's not aligned, it's just going to create drag, right? And again, everyone's trying to head in that same direction. And if there's bolt-ons along the side, they're just creating weight, whether that's in strategically or again operationally or within the sales products that you're packaging. It's very clear when there is an add-on or a plus one, right? Or something that's been bundled. I will caveat that though with saying some of the best things I've seen have been a creative bundling of assets. Some of the best solutions I've seen have been an approach that was a little bit more lateral, but still resulted in people going away and doing a hell of a lot of work to understand what it is that's trying to be achieved and bundle it in a way where the rationale makes a hell of a lot of sense. Or giving alternatives to how those different bundlings could work.
It's a really good point because I think not that there's a silver bullet, but I've always been curious around how that gets received in agency land. If there is a strong linkage, if you're pulling in assets, but there's some sort of single-minded proposition or some really strong unifying insight that shows why it should be there, is that, I suppose, an approach around that, making it feel more...
The responsibilities on the agency... Ultimately, with this one for me as well, it comes back to the power of the brief, right? The strength of the brief, the depth of the brief without drowning in it, because you can drown in a single brief. 7 pages for a brief can sometimes be a bit long, but sometimes it can be exactly what you need because it helps the sales team understand what is the end objective, what are the mechanics for getting to that objective, and what is the role of media in achieving it. But for your team to be able to then go away and go, right, actually what they're trying to do is achieve the most reach they can. We can bundle so many different things from the business we work within or outside of it to achieve that, despite the fact they've asked specifically for this tactic. And I'm sure you've experienced it, as have your teams. You can answer those different layers of the brief. The trick would be not relying on it, not thinking that just because you've gone over and above that people are going to be blown out of their chairs, because these are the people who wrote the brief. They understand what it is they're trying to achieve as well. But I also have a soft spot for challenging a brief. But I also know that creates a hell of a lot of work. There's only so many times you can do it. And I don't sit on the end of, frankly, I don't sit on the end of as many no's as sales teams. You guys have to hear no a lot more and be resilient in that space, which I know you spend a lot of time with teams coaching around as well. But part of me always thinks if you can come up with a rationale that does authentically answer something that's trying to be achieved in the activity, you stand a pretty good chance of at least getting in the room.
I would agree. I mean, to go back, we're, media side, publisher side, we're constantly having new products that we want to go to market with. But I guess what I'd say to everybody is just take a very, very kind of pragmatic view to it and go, if we had to go to market with this proposition or this product, do not go to it without priming the market, without asking questions, without stress testing it. So, to that point earlier about a meeting having some validation, it's fine to go and see an agency partner and go, here's a new proposition we're bringing. I want to see if you think it'll add value. I want to get an understanding of how this is perceived. Let's actually devote some time because this could be really exciting. We would love to incorporate it, onto the next proposal we put to you. But at least it's then informed. So, look, I think that one to me is a really good kind of summary of everything around no client orientation. I would say that in the market at the moment, and probably over the last 3 to 4 years, bespoke solutions that feel very much built for the client and tailored to the client, that's the currency right now.
I get it. And agencies, that's the language we speak. We have to tailor everything. We do exist to tailor everything. That's our job, is to bring it together and knit together solutions that speak specifically to a category or a problem or a client. It is the kind of tailoring of that specificity. What I would say, and we talk about quite a bit about this agency side, is the idea of co-creating. And co-creating can be through consultation, through informing, or through kind of joint responsibility of building something as well. But if you involve the end user early, i.e. the people you're trying to sell to, bring them in earlier in the piece and understand authentically, to help them actually be a part of it or not, help them understand how that product works for them, or to ask them to help in proliferating what it might look like. At any point, if you can bring the end user in to help co-create, you've almost immediately bought in subscription to its capability. And that can be another reason to have a meeting. We're thinking about building this thing. Do you think your client could use this thing? If we were to build it, would you be interested in having some input into this thing? We might go and build this thing.
It actually feeds into a podcast we did recently with Julian Cole, who obviously is a strategy consultant based over in LA. And he had a really interesting point of going, don't pitch a new idea to an entire room of people. You really need to not form a coalition beforehand, but if you think you've got something a bit risky, talk to 1 or 2 of the key decision makers that are going to be in the room beforehand, so there's no nasty surprises. I think just getting that, what they call the persuasion, thinking about that, you're at least going to qualify whether you're walking into a room where your product is going to land or it's not. You can save yourself a lot of heartache in the meantime. Let's talk about sin number 5, the sin of going direct to clients.
Whoa.
It's probably the one I have to call out. I think a lot of agency people who come into agency sales, I should say, from direct sales, struggle to wrap their brain around the concept of not going and sitting in front of the client and pleading their case directly. There even is a perception, I think, that agencies are barriers to getting deals through.
Wow, we're going to talk about it.
This
is a moment in
media
sales.
We're
going to talk about it.
So it's going to be a cathartic day.
This is very closely tied to what we spoke about earlier around the relationships. And frankly, there's commercial structures in place for people who are being paid to do jobs to achieve certain outcomes, and people are going to get sensitive about those sort of things. For me, it continues to come back to what is the objective we're trying to achieve. If it is to drive our client's business forward, then stuffing something in their face isn't going to be the result that they're looking for. Clients don't pay agencies to sanitize them from the media. That would be a really inefficient use of money, because there's a lot of other ways you could do that, like just not accepting a phone call.
Meetings,
Yeah. So that's absolutely not why agencies exist. In fact, it would be counterintuitive. We would never have the ability to access opportunities if we cut that off. I think the crux of it is going direct to clients without involving people whose responsibility it is to make recommendations to the client on that, again, feels counterintuitive and quite risky. Because you unlikely will have a better relationship with the client than the agency does, in terms of even just on a personal level. It is a sensitive topic because agencies are tasked with the job of making those recommendations. It is the part of our job that becomes the most subjective, the recommendation, right? We work overtime to rationalize, build in metrics, build in an understanding that can be objective. So we and the client are discussing a very concrete solution to their problem. When you bring the subjectivity of, I think this is a good idea into it, it creates a whole new dynamic and moves it away from that sort of rational situation. So there's going to be a sensitivity based in going around a relationship in going around that, you're effectively saying this other person doesn't know what they're talking about. This other person's point of view is less valid than my point of view in what I think will drive client X's business forward. Which again is going to create friction because people spend a lot of time and energy making sure they do understand what's going to drive it forward.
And I think, what fares well for a media salesperson selling into the direct market is this guiding principle of you've got to be tenacious, you've got to be very much in the pursuit of the decision maker. You've got to plead your case to the person that can ultimately sign off on that. And I think this is where the agency dynamic people really struggle with, because particularly, what is, a story that plays out constantly is a big direct advertiser gets to a point where they're too large to be dealing directly with media suppliers and they engage the services of an agency. And then suddenly you've got a media salesperson here going, we've been working on a creative idea, we've got history with this client, there's some level of heritage there, we understand their business intimately. Now I've got a gatekeeper in the relationship and they're taking this client on a completely different direction. What I would say is you've got to play the long game there and respect that. And go, it is what it is. It's a natural consequence of clients growing, and just be proud that you've been, in some way influential in that journey for them to get to a point where they were that large.
It's hard. It's hard not. I can see why it's hard not to take it personally, and I've been doing this long enough to know that it's hard to separate taking it personally from keeping it professional as well. I do know though that a gatekeeper does not constrain anything unless you're not supposed to be on the other side of the gate.
That's a really good point.
To police something that previously existed and that result in a change is illuminating in itself. So I think a gatekeeper is also going to be your best advocate if you approach it in the right way. Because the gatekeeper is not being paid to keep everybody out. They're being paid to make sure the stuff that comes through is the most right for whatever it is that needs to be achieved.
And I think that's a good point to finish this one on is, to me, if you want to have a level of direct access to a client, do it with the filter of I want to be invited by the agency to do so, and the filter I want to put on that is that it's for the betterment of the work that we all do collectively together. If that's your intention and you do it the right way, you'll have a much more powerful relationship with that advertiser because you'll be sold in as somebody who has credibility, thought leadership in your channel.
Can't overstate the value of advocacy.
Correct.
All of our businesses spend a lot of time investing in, thinking about, strategizing around advocacy because it's incredibly powerful.
Let's move on to number 6, which sort of feeds into the last one. Number 6, the sin of taking it personally. This is a big one. I get it. There's a lot at stake. We're in a high stakes industry. You can live or die by the outcome of one or two, deals going your way or not going your way. What I think is the cardinal sin of media salespeople, which can just absolutely implode your reputation in the space of 4 seconds, is being difficult to deal with if you lose a brief. Just not taking it to heart, looking at being realistic, like where does your medium actually sit in the pecking order, in the priority? What about if somebody gives you well-intentioned feedback about your product, about how you can improve, and you throw the stock standard rebuttal back at them rather than actually internalizing it? That to me is the kind of stuff where I think people can really miss the mark of just not being able to park their own emotion or their own personal investment and actually, see the bigger picture.
Yeah, it is hard because, you know what, man, we said it at the start. We're dealing with people's livelihood and we're aware of that. And that gravity and weight is not lost on agencies. If anything, it adds a layer of complexity to what it is we're trying to do because we like everyone we work with. And if we could, we would. We would spread it as thin as possible. But unfortunately, that's not the best way to grow clients' business through the investment in media. I can see why we take it personally. Agencies take it personally when we lose a pitch, when we lose a client, or when a relationship goes sour. We take it personally. So we have the utmost empathy for that side of things as well. I think feedback's a really interesting one. Feedback is one of the most powerful tools in an individual's arsenal, let alone a business. So ensuring you've got the right framework for a feedback is really important. We spend a lot of time and energy on making sure we use these inside our business and with people we work with as well, to ensure that everybody understands why a certain decision has been made. And I'd always encourage everyone to seek the information you require to understand. You will know when you understand. You may not like the information. And in fact, you may not agree. But that's for you to work through.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, fortunate I've been doing this long enough that, oftentimes if a piece of bad news is delivered to me or my team about a piece of business not going our way, you almost feel a level of guilt on the agency's side where you actually have to kind of go, hey, look, we're not going to close our doors based on the outcome of one or two pieces of business. We structure our business in a way where that isn't the kind of, there's not that risk. That's our job. Our job is to build in consistency. Our job is to make sure that we've got a plan to do in the event of losing business. What I would say is perceive it as an opportunity to learn. I mean, so much of media sales, in my view, is what you do in response to factors beyond your control or outside of your sphere of influence. If you lose a piece of business, you can sit there and stew on it and say that you've been unjustly treated, or say that your competitors are a bunch of idiots, or say that it's based on price. It's the one I love hearing. It's always price. It's always based on price. What I would say is park that visceral reaction of feeling disappointed or sad or taking it personally, and just look at whether you actually have missed something, whether there was an opportunity there to do something differently, to do a post-mortem, to have a debrief with the person over coffee.
Yeah, use it. Use it to immediately launch into those next meetings that you want to have and kind of go, okay, cool, so what's next? Now that I know that these are the objectives that are being driven by that business, what else can I do?
Yeah.
Decision-making, like we don't set boundaries with each other, right? We make decisions on what needs to be achieved right now. It's not a no forever. It's a not this time, or it's a we're going in this direction this time, or it's a what's next. It's always an opportunity to have another question. The one thing I would say, and I had to learn this the hard way, is you can't argue with maths.
Yeah.
Maths is maths. So if there is something you don't understand, make sure it's not the numbers.
Yep.
Be clear, because there is a lot of rationality that comes into, obviously, the commercial side of media sales as well. And if you don't understand them, seek out the person who provided them, get them to take you through it as well. Make sure you're doing everything you can to understand why that decision was made. It'll just make you better at your job next time. And that's the same on both sides of the fence in terms of agency and sales, is you need to be as clear as possible as to why something has or has not happened. You will be phenomenally better placed than your competition next time around as a result of that experience that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
I completely agree with that. All right, number 7.
Yes.
The 7 deadly sins. I left this one to last because it's my favourite.
Yep.
The sin of talking smack.
Yeah.
Talking smack. What am I saying?
Don't.
Bagging your competitors, gossiping about people in the industry, speaking negative. This is a big one. And it's not just because I'm paranoid because I run a sales team, but speaking negatively about your boss in market,
seeking feedback,
or disparagingly about your company. I mean, nothing will tank your company's reputation like people who represent the company out in market talking badly about it. But talking smack, I mean, we're fortunate that particularly in the agency side of the business, we forge really good, genuine, I'm going to say professional friendships with people, where oftentimes the lines do get a little bit blurred between the meeting agenda and sort of the sub-agenda items that you chat around in the small talk. But why do you think this one is so damaging to someone's reputation on the media sales side?
It's the opposite of advocacy, isn't it? Right? It's demonstrating the behaviours that people don't want to spend any time around. It comes back to trust. If this is how you talk about people who aren't here, how do you talk about me when I'm not here? And trust is critical in a relationship. It's probably a whole podcast in itself. But yeah, don't troll.
Yeah.
Don't troll online. Don't troll in life. There's nothing to be gained. Gossip is not constructive, right? If someone's not present, don't talk about them. If you're talking about something that happened in the past that's not in a constructive fashion or that you're trying to learn from, you're gossiping. Just don't do it. Because this is a professional context, and it's only going to reflect badly on you.
And I think this is one where, I've said at the start of the episode, you've got to look at intent. People don't know what your intent is. I think one of the big things that happens, and look, it's probably a positive thing in many ways, but people get into selling their media channel or working for their company, and they become advocates for their channel to the point where it's almost like they've got these blinders on and they can't see outside of their own little patch of the world. And so suddenly any competitor is horrible and they're the best. Anyone else who's doing anything different to them is terrible. You know, they like to elevate their brand or their product above all else. So I think there is a level of going. Some of it is you have to go out there and sell your proposition and position why you might be superior, but you got to walk that fine line. Are you doing it at the expense of someone else's reputation, or are you doing it in a way that's respectful and being an ambassador for your channel? Yeah,
it's just not a good look, is it? I mean, back to some of the stuff we were talking about at the start as well around the relationship side of things. I think relationships, business, any good agency, any good business does not make decisions on the basis of relationships. Those decisions are not going to be made on that. They'll be made on the rational reasons why that is the right way to go forward. Relationships make those decisions easier and those conversations more effective to move through to what needs to happen next time. So to confuse the relationship as having influence on the outcome as opposed to having influence on the ability to get to the outcome would be a mistake in my experience. But talking smack is the quickest way to erode your relationship with whoever you're talking to. It actually won't affect as much the relationship to the person you're talking about. It'll be the person you're talking to in that moment about you. So it's just not smart professionally.
I agree. Yeah. Well, look, that draws that to a close, the 7 deadly sins. So let me do a recap. We've got the sin of talking about your budgets or commissions, the sin of not learning or respecting the agency structure, thou shalt not have bad meeting etiquette. I love that saying, vibrate is not silent. The sin of no client orientation in your product, off the shelf. Yep, I should have called it the sin of grabbing something off the shelf. The sin of going direct to clients, the sin of taking it personally, and the sin of talking big old smack about everyone and everything but yourself. I think that's a nice summary of all the different things. I'm sure there's a plethora of other ones. I'm sure at some point we could have a really meaningful dialogue around some of the stuff that agencies potentially, do as their 7 deadly sins.
I'd love to. It'd probably be worthwhile flipping it on its head and having the reverse done in that frame and kind of smashing the two together. And seeing where it works. Absolutely. Yeah, or the 7 things that agencies look very, very favourably upon above all else. Maybe we shouldn't have gone down this negative path straight away. We should have actually let... No, you got to start somewhere.
You got to start with negative. I hear you. All right, we're going to jump into the final segment.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
We got a question submitted via LinkedIn, and this person has asked to withhold the name of themselves and their employer. However, this feels like a pretty universal issue, so I'm going to read it out and let's see if we can unpack it. So the question: I work for a publisher that is very focused on direct sales. Our office runs sales incentives and tactics that are all about hitting group goals, like number of meetings, amount of weekly revenue booked, or number of packages sold. We all participate as a team, and I love the motivating effect it can have on us. What I don't like is that my agencies don't feel as receptive or fast-moving as direct clients with some of these opportunities. How do I get more uptake from my agencies? They're not going to like our answer. I feel like I'm losing listeners with every one of these questions I answer. But you know what? I would have asked that question when I was 23, pivoting into agency sales myself. What's your initial... Reflecting on that question, your initial thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things. I wouldn't confuse fast moving with moving fast. Just like you, agencies are busy.
That's deep, man.
Thanks, man. What I did was I turned the words around. I'll show you later. Because agencies are moving fast. If they're not fast moving on your particular thing, that's got nothing to do with the reasons why they're not picking it up. I had to learn a hard lesson about 10 years ago that agencies' clients don't spend all their time thinking about media. That was a brutal lesson that I had to learn because I spend all my time thinking about media. At 1 a.m. staring at the ceiling, working out how I can redivide things to work even better. But my clients don't, which was quite the epiphany. Agencies don't spend all their time looking at sales decks. We don't spend all our time considering the minutiae in that space. We put time aside to make sure that we can review and rationalize anything that's put in front of us and do due diligence. And we have systems and processes, which are actually pretty good at sharing and usually include within the brief as well. And I'd actually encourage anyone who in sales who wanted to see some of that in action to reach out more than happy to have you come into Ikon for a day and have a sticky beak at that, because we do things in a very, I'll say fluid but structured way as well. So agencies are busy, but so are you, is kind of the outcome on that one. How do you get them to move faster? Kind of all the things we just spent the last half an hour talking about. Follow the rules of etiquette, make things effective, have a framework for feedback, right? Don't be a budget bully, be easy to deal with. Know your product, be available, be responsive. Know that an agency's timeline is dictated by a client's timeline as well. And every decision they're making is trying to get the best outcome for a client. I'd also always say there's only so far you can polish a turd. And a turd is subjective. A turd can be something that you can't use for what you need to achieve right now. So make sure you're using your time effectively and chasing the right things. And if you're not sure, ask. And that then comes back to when you get the information, there's a big difference between not understanding and not liking it.
See, with this one for me, I think what I got to do, I'll park the question about the agency and I'll just reflect on what I think is going on. Media sales can be a really lonely job. And it could be a really mentally challenging job a lot of the time if you're not driving results. And so I can understand how that primal team mentality of driving a team initiative and, having people somewhat be motivated by the energy of the room around them and creating those environments could be very motivating for a salesperson. What I would say is you've got to look at the customer profile. If you've got people selling into a direct market, transacting, which is what it sounds like, that is not a way to engage any agency that I've worked on in 11 years. So what I would suggest is that you need to bring it back to going, you can still have the essence of what that good primal team tactic, that the motivating impact of that, but you've got to tweak the way that you deploy that tactic into your agency market. And it's got to be coming from a client-centric perspective. So think of it in terms of what actually is meaningful value to your agencies. What are the kind of contact points that you have access to, and how do you find that balance between not over contacting people or being a nuisance? How do you manage the expectations of your sales manager to say, hey, listen, there's a completely different dynamic here. Clearly what we're doing isn't landing at a revenue level. We're not converting. Let me go away and put a plan together for how we can actually tweak and adapt this. I still want to feel like I'm contributing to the team goals, but my marketplace is different to theirs. So, and I apologize to this person because they asked me this question probably about 4 months ago, but I thought it's a good one for us to cover off on this episode.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good question for your boss, to be frank, to kind of go, these are all the things that I see. Can we construct a strategy together? Because the receptivity I'm used to isn't what I'm getting. So I know I need to change something. Probably not much.
Yep.
Right. Probably just a tweak in the way I'm approaching it, but something's not landing. Can we work on that together? Could we get an agency involve the end user and work out how ways of working could be a little bit stronger to bring it forward as well? Because agencies do love that, because doing a lot of work up front saves a lot of time out the back.
I love it. This person, if they want to reach out to Adam and myself, feel free to do it. Are there any sort of parting thoughts or comments on this one, mate, before we wrap it up?
Only to reiterate what we've spoken about, which is that relationships need to be nurtured, right, and forged. As you said, they take work. And this industry is fortunate enough to be based around the ability to work with other people. We need to be good at communicating. We need to be good at working together. We need to be patient with each other. We need to be kind with each other as well, because we are dealing with each other's livelihood. And the more time we spend together being conscious of those things, the better. Trust is huge. We didn't really get a chance to touch on it, but building trust, it takes you years to build trust. It takes you 5 minutes to explode it. But as I said, we could spend days talking about that too.
Nice. All right, team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. Head to MediaSalesMastery.com to help pick the topic, guide the show, and don't forget to subscribe to receive new episodes each week.